It's time for another book versus adaptation where I watch the adaptation, then read the book and decide which you'll like better based on the plot, characters, and relationships. So you're browsing the available titles on Apple Plus TV and you come across Dark Matter, the most recent adaptation of Blake Crouch's best-selling novel. But you've been burned by adaptations before. There's absolutely no way that the adaptation is as good as the book, right? Well, I've watched the adaptation and read the book, so I'm here to tell you which is worth your valuable time. Just as a note, there will be spoilers for the book and the adaptation, so if you don't want to be spoiled for those, you can use the chapters in the description box below to get to my summary at the end. For those of you that are new here, I'm Steph, a lover of all things stories, and I have a particular passion for book adaptations. If you're not familiar with Dark Matter was a New York Times best-selling novel by Blake Crouch. The adaptation of the book just finished airing back in, I want to say, early July, and you can watch it on Apple Plus TV. Now, when I was trying to figure out what my first book versus adaptation back on BookTube was going to be, I found out that Dark Matter was being adapted. I had never read Dark Matter, but I had watched Wayward Pines back in the day when it was an adaptation and really enjoyed that show and thought it was different. So I thought, oh, well, this could be fun. On top of that, I am a big fan of Once Upon a Bookish Steph's BookTube channel, and I know that this is one of her favorite books. So naturally, I was curious. Are you happy with your life, with the choices that you've made? If you made different choices, would you still be you? These are all the questions that Blake Crouch asks in his book, Dark Matter. If you're not familiar with the story, I kind of tell people when I explain this book that it's kind of like It's a Wonderful Life meets Sliders. So you are introduced to Jason Desson, who has a wonderful wife and son and is a professor at a college. One night, when Jason goes to meet a friend at a bar for a drink, as he's walking home, he gets kidnapped. When he wakes up, he's in a place he has never seen before with people who are talking to him as if he knows him, and he has no idea what's going on, but all he knows is that the life he thought he had is now different. So if you can follow the train of thought here, it's pretty obvious that we're dealing with alternate realities. Jason is a scientist, and it turns out that Jason from a different reality actually kidnapped the Jason that we're following in the story and threw him into this box that's supposed to be like Schrodinger's cat experiment where you get sent into a quantum phase and are able to go to different realities. So the Jason we're following in this story is trying everything he can to get back to his family. Starting back in May, Apple Plus started releasing their adaptation of this book. Let's break down the book and the adaptation, starting with the plot. Here are the things that I definitely think are better in the book. The plot overall for the show and the book is pretty identical, so naturally I feel like the book has a leg up because it is the source material. And this is also going to be a funny thing because when I was watching the show, they go to a world that is dealing with a very, very deadly pandemic. When I was watching it, the only thing I could think about is how the heck they didn't end up spreading that disease or picking up some other disease from another reality and bringing it and destroying everything there. So the fact that Jason has to follow a very strict quarantine protocol after coming out of the box for the first time kind of made me really glad that that was in the book. And I wish that they had put something like that in the show. Editing stuff here. So I realized as I was editing this, I actually saw footage from the first episode where he does go through this quarantine that I mention in the book. For some reason, my brain just didn't remember it. So I'm still gonna say the book has a leg up here because the fact that I was still thinking these thoughts even after they put this scene into the show means that maybe they didn't do quite enough to help limit that cross-contamination. Just because it was constantly in the back of my mind, how are we not cross-contaminating realities. I mean, the answer is we're cross-contaminating realities, and that comes into play later. But anyway, I appreciated this nod in the book to my thoughts. I will also say the twist for this story, it's one of those things that I should have seen coming. If I really thought about it, I should have seen this coming, but I did not. I don't remember the exact number of when the twist happens, but when it does, I was completely floored. Because that's originally in the book, 100% gonna give the credit to the book here. Here's what I think is done better overall for the plot and story in the show. First and foremost, of course, adaptations are a visual medium. So I will say I preferred the visuals provided in the book to the show. Not saying that Blake Crouch is not a phenomenal writer. Like, he had really good prose, and there were moments where I was like, ooh, with how he described things. But I feel like if I hadn't watched the show first and kind of had those visuals in my mind, the book would have been very difficult for me personally to picture. I'm also going to put it out there. The book has some shady consent issues that are really fixed in the show. I'll talk about the reasons why I think they did this when I'm talking about characters later on. For me, it was really important that the show Jason did not go and sleep with another Daniela, because that's not his wife. I mean, she is, but she isn't. And I feel like the show understands that line a lot clearer, whereas the book definitely follows this frame of, but she is his wife. But she's not, because you guys haven't been through the same experiences. On the flip side of that, when it comes to Daniela, and who I'm going to call Jason 2, because that's how he's referred to in the book, the show definitely ups the level of this is predatory. Like, what Jason 2 does is essentially, SA. And the reason for that is because Daniela thinks that she's with her husband when she's not. So she can't actually consent in that instance. I appreciated the fact that the show went there, whereas the book kind of dived in on the other side. I think it was handled well in the book, but I appreciate that the show took it the other way. Now, the major leg up that the show has over the book is the fact that you get to see the story from other characters' perspectives, because the book is told from a limited third-person point of view. While we do get like 2 scenes from Daniela's perspective, the rest of the book is all told from Jason's point of view. In being able to show what the other characters are going through at the same time as what Jason's going through is the major strength of the adaptation. And you really see this played out in things like Jason 2's disillusionment with the life that he's taken over. You also get a lot more added tension with how Jason 2 has to hide his knowledge gaps as far as his experiences with Daniela and, I keep on wanting to call him Mason, but Mason's the dead one, Charlie. I also enjoyed getting to see the different realities of like Leighton and Ryan and Amanda. All right, next let's talk about characters. In my previous book versus adaptations, I would kind of dive into like every characters. I'm sticking to like the main characters that the book really focuses on, just for, honestly, time. So for the purpose of this section, I'm gonna go over Jason, Daniela, and Amanda. So I will say Jason in the book, because we are in his perspective, he comes off a lot more lighthearted and funny than he does in the show. However, in the show, Jason comes off a little bit smarter. Like in the book, we're told how smart Jason is, and we can see it when like he breaks down the sciencey science. Other than that, when it comes to like figuring things out, I felt like the Jason in the show definitely had an advantage over Jason in the book. The show also really differentiates between Jason and Jason 2. Jason 2 in the show is definitely much more a villain. And maybe you could argue for the gray area of having Jason 2 not be as bad in the book, but what it did do is it really strengthened my emotional connection to Jason, because Jason is a better person in the show. And we see that over and over again with examples like how he doesn't sleep with Daniela 2, and also that he doesn't kill Jason 2 in the show. And I think what this does for the viewers, it kind of gets rid of that gray area of the Jason that we've been following being like the best version of Jason, and thus making him better than the copies that come out of the box, even though technically they are still the first Jason. They've just been through different things. That's the major twist. Spoilers, sorry. Another reason why I feel like Jason's portrayal in the show is stronger, they really play up him being a father. Do I think they needed to add the dead twin? No, not really. Unless you're thinking it from Jason 2's perspective and like, oh, like he thought Jason's life was perfect, and that kind of leads him down the disillusionment, starting with, oh, I thought this guy's life was perfect, but he's got a dead kid. But the bond between Jason and Charlie is, really emphasized in the show, whereas in the book, his pining is pretty much all for Daniela. All right, let's talk about Daniela. I'll admit, I might be biased. I am a huge Labyrinth fan, therefore Jennifer Connelly is like my OG girl crush. I will say I prefer Daniela's characterization in the show. She starts noticing things are off with Jason pretty early on. I mean, Daniela in the book does too, but with Daniela in the book, it's more like, oh, this is the guy that I fell in love with, and it's like amazing and new, and it's like that, your marriage has gone stagnant and suddenly like things are getting better again. And Daniela in the book, she notices these differences with Jason, but she doesn't necessarily see them as like red flags. She's like, oh, like he's suddenly taking care of himself and flossing and kissing me like it's the first time. And yeah, I can see how you would definitely get swept up in that. Whereas I appreciated that the show embraced the depth of Daniela's relationship and those 15 years with Jason and being like, I thought you knew me and now it turns out you don't know me at all. It has just started thunderstorming. I'm gonna keep recording because quite frankly, this is the time that I have to record. But if you hear some lightning and the lighting starts getting pretty bad, that's why. I live in a place where it's hurricane season. I'm gonna be dealing with thunderstorms from now until October. Anyway, back to Daniela. Daniela is much more put off by Jason 2 in the show because he's not her husband. Playing up the arrogance of Jason 2, thinking that he's the best version of himself, that he would get to be with Daniela, says a lot and is honestly a very important theme throughout the story. But I liked the additions of like her just feeling off at the dinner, how she's so embarrassed when he tries to do this big romantic gesture and she's like, that was mortifying. How could you have done that? It definitely made the marriage between Daniela and Jason more impactful. Now let's talk about Amanda. I will say Amanda is much more three-dimensional in the show. Now I love Alice Braga. I think she's phenomenal. It's almost as if Blake Crouch wrote her in to be the way Jason escapes from Jason 2's reality and then didn't really know what to do with her. Now, Blake was very involved in the show creation and the writing process for the show. And so I think he realized that was a problem and fixed it for the show, which I appreciate. I also love because she's kind of in a position where she can't go back to her reality, that she spends the time in each reality looking herself up to see, is this reality a good fit for me? Can I make a life here for myself? It gave her a purpose instead of just tagging along with Jason. Also, can I just say that her character arc ending in the show has a much better payoff. Here's this character that I really came to like. The way she leaves the story in the show is so much more satisfying for her as a character, and I appreciated that, whereas the book, the focus is very narrow on Jason. So her leaving, like, one, in a letter, you've been traversing the multiverse with this person and you're gonna, like, Dear John them? Like, what? Anyway, I had a problem with that in the book, if you can't tell. The reason for that, I think, is because the focus is very narrow on Jason, and her leaving sends Jason down this negative spiral. He still does that in the show, but there's also this greater sense of satisfaction that Amanda has found a reality that is a kinder world and is the world that she imagined. I just thought it was very poetic and a nice resolution to her character arc. All right, so you'll see I kind of beat around the bush a little bit in the character portion about relationships, but now I'm gonna do a bit more of a deep dive. Again, I'm gonna focus mostly on Jason's relationships. Let's start with, of course, the pivotal relationship in this show, Jason and Daniela. While I had some issues with the consent, I do really like that the book focuses on Jason's love for Daniela in any universe. And we do see that in the show, but I do think the show emphasizes his relationship with his reality's Daniela more. However, I really also liked, as I mentioned, that the show emphasizes that this Daniela should be with this Jason. And I think the reason for that is it makes for a better payoff when Daniela chooses this version of Jason we've been following to be her partner. I think another strength that the book has about this relationship is Daniela's pain for the other Jasons is really emphasized in the book. Whereas it's kind of passed over, and like the way they do it in the show is really more to like build tension and action. I think she mentions how she's feeling. Once she finds out about the different Jasons, it's a pretty recurring thing until the end of the book. I did love getting to see that empathetic nature of her being, well, these are all men that I've spent the last 15 years with, and feeling pain for them because there aren't untold versions of herself for each of them. All right, now let's flip that relationship and talk about Jason 2 and Amanda. Did I say Jason 2 and Daniela or Jason 2 and Amanda? We're gonna re-record just to be on the safe side. Yep. Okay, let's flip that relationship on its head and talk about Jason 2 and Daniela. So initially, in the book and the show, Jason 2 and how he treats Daniela is really exciting for Daniela. It's, you know, he's spicing up their marriage and acting like he did when they first fell in love. And, you know, what woman wouldn't want that with her husband of 15 years? However, again, the benefit of seeing other character perspectives outside of Jason 2 is that we really see how that relationship sours because Jason 2 is a very different person because of the choices he's made. And that is not the person that this Daniela likes or wants to be with. As I mentioned before, it's very clear that Jason 2 does not understand Daniela with everything that she's been through in their 15 years together. I think that makes for a more meaningful story. Whereas in the book, it almost comes off as like, well, is it infidelity because it was you or not? And that seems to be like the main focus of like Jason 2 and Daniela in the book, and I didn't care for that. All right, now let's talk about Jason and Amanda, who I will admit I kind of ship, but only a little bit. And I think that's on purpose. Like, I think Blake's trying to get you to feel that way. First off, I was really surprised that the Amanda in the books did not have a relationship with Jason 2 outside of being his psychiatrist. I felt like that added just another layer to their relationship, and it made sense for why Amanda would risk everything to save Jason. While I loved the scene in the book, just like I loved it in the show, where Jason and Amanda are in a motel and they're talking and they're in the same bed, and you feel the connection between them, and she says, "Do you want me to leave?" And he says something along the lines of, "I don't want you to, but I need you to." One, very romantic in both stories for Jason. However, because we have this established relationship with Amanda and Jason too, it actually adds another layer to that scene and really to his whole dynamic with Amanda, because, you see the buildup of that attraction clearer, because obviously if Jason too was in a relationship with Amanda, then it makes a lot more sense for Jason to start building attraction to Amanda as well. Whereas that scene came off kind of out of nowhere in the book, the added layer slowly built and built and built to this wonderful moment where Jason picks to stay faithful to Daniela. Now, this is just a trope that is very personal to me, because I think one of the most romantic things a person can do is to choose to stay faithful to their partner. It's unrealistic, in my opinion, to think that you are going to go through your life never feeling attraction for someone outside of your partnership. What's romantic is that staying with your partner is a choice, and being faithful to them is a choice. And if you are continuously making that choice, then that is really romantic. It's why Honey, I'm Good is like my favorite song in the world. Anyway, that was another tangent, sorry. But just to finish off here, similar to what I said when I was talking about Amanda earlier, their relationship has such a better payoff in the book. Like, she arranges this amazing day where she's like, you can stay with me in this great world. And like, you can tell that he's thinking about it, because he doesn't know if he's going to be able to get home. And then when she hands him the rest of the ampules and is like, I'm staying here. I'd like you to stay with me, but I understand if you have to go. And then again, he's choosing Daniela. It's this uplifting moment for Amanda, even though it's bittersweet. And I definitely prefer how that played out in the show to how it played out in the book. Okay, so I will say, I went in to this completely blind, other than knowing that it's one of Steph's favorite book. I knew nothing about Dark Matter, other than it was a sci-fi. And I will say, when I watched the adaptation, I really didn't know what was going to happen next. I'm sure if I had read the book first, I still would have felt that way, that like I didn't know what was going to happen next. That being said, even having watched the show, I was really curious to see how the book was different. And I still really enjoyed the book. I think the main thing I was looking for is like, I don't know if there's going to be a season 2 of Dark Matter on Apple Plus, but I was kind of looking for what is like the setup for season 2 and what was actual book. And I was really pleasantly surprised that what I thought was the setup for season 2 was in the book. Before I tell you overall which one I liked better, let me know down in the comments if you have seen the adaptation or read the book or both and know which one you like better. Yeah, let me know in the comments. I am gonna say here, I think both the book and the adaptation are great. If you want more interiority and more of like a character study, I would recommend the book. If you want more action and broader character development outside of just Jason, I would choose the show. Let's see what stories tomorrow brings.